So tell me the Jalopnik story behind that car over there.
The Deutsch-Bonnet, the Jalopnik story behind the white Deutsch-Bonnet. I don't even know how it got on the Jalopnik, but I think I sent a picture to Phil or someone. They're talking about wacky cars and big motors, and at the time I had a Porsche 356 that had like a giant V8 stuck in the front, and they thought that was weird. Then I brought up the Deutsch-Bonnet. Pretty rare car, Deutsch-Bonnet Le Mans Spider from the early 60s, right before they went out of production. I think only about 20 examples were made. Originally powered by 850cc, two-cylinder, horizontally opposed, air-cooled engines, you know, developing a total of maybe 45 horsepower. But in Akron, Ohio, we're about power, real power. So I found this at a garage sale. It's got, instead of the 850cc engine, it's got a 400 cubic inch Pontiac V8, which makes sense because it was a Deutsch-Bonnet Le Mans and there's a good chance that the Pontiac engine came out of a Le Mans. So, you know, it works, and it goes great in a straight line. Don't think about turning it. It's got a full aluminum tub, and I showed a picture of it to the president of the French Deutsch-Bonnet Club. And after a lot of contemplation, he, in his best diplomatic tone, said, "At least it's on the road." So that's kind of the story, and we take it out once or twice a year and just kind of burn rubber on the street out front, and that's it. I don't remember how it got on there either. I think. Okay, so here's another one of the Jalopnik cars. It's the Lita Caballero. It's not Caballero, it's Caballero with a 1L, and very specific. Known worldwide as the most beautiful and finest automobile ever made in Post Falls, Idaho. Kind of as a family project by a wealthy inventor there to start a family business. They bought raw Chevette chassis from General Motors, applied all their interesting body panels, which added probably 300 pounds of weight, and sold a grand total of less than 100 of them before they decided it wasn't the greatest idea. But a very Jalopnik automobile.
These batteries are ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay, and now the Olssen Eagle. The Olssen Eagle actually found on Jalopnik. It was on eBay. They posted it, and it turned out I knew the seller, a friend of mine in Chicago, and I called him up just as a joke. I said, "Well, how much are you going to sell it to me for?" And he told me how he bought it on a whim with a partner, and I offered him half of what his starting bid was. He called his partner, and you know, sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. So we got it here. Then we ran another poll on Jalopnik, how to make it even uglier, and got all kinds of commenter suggestions as to colors and modifications. So we took advantage of that and sent it to the local Mako, of course. You know, couldn't do any better than the Mako. And now it's officially Cadillac Pearl, Cadillac White Pearl with this. I forget what the BMW color was, but it was a one-year-only M3 color. So I figured it was like a good culture clash of paint to put on this car.
So what's the story behind the Olssen Eagle?
Oh, it's a crazy story. This car was bought new as a Tornado in 1973, and the guy who bought it sold it, immediately took it to a boat company in Maine and had them customize it. And all the body work, all the modifications were made with nothing but chicken wire, cardboard, fiberglass, and Bondo. As you can see, we've had it painted recently, and the bubbles have already started to creep in. They're just meant to be.
Let's see, what else in here? Oh, this one.
About this already? Okay, yeah, this is, not that anybody will recognize the XR1, but this is what used to be the XR1. They called it the world's first electronic automobile. It actually is a pretty important car. It was a BMW concept car from 1976, done by Pietro Frua, one of the great Italian coach builders. Did the tour of the auto show circuit in '76, and by the late '70s had gone back to Frua, at which point an American entrepreneur who had this idea to build this spectacular electric car in 1979 contacted him, and it was converted to world's first electronic car. It was electric motors, but computer controlled. I don't know what kind of computers they used at the time. Long story short, the guy made some bad decisions. He got some investors and didn't do the things I guess the investors were looking for. He was trying to build an electric car company in the middle of oil country down in Dallas. So He was sued for fraud, was convicted, eventually exonerated. By the time he was exonerated, unfortunately the car was sold off at government auction, and it led a pretty rough life. Eventually ended up at a wrecking yard in Nevada, which is where it came from.
What happened to the, whose head hit the windshield?
That's a good question. I'm hoping it's the person that did this to the body, because there's no excuse for taking such a beautiful hand-built aluminum car with such great history and just defiling it like this. But the good news is the Frua archive still has all the records of the build of the car, still has the Frua body tag on it, and at some point I'm pretty confident that it'll be brought back to its former glory. Another area I kind of have a newfound fascination with three-wheeled cars. I've always wanted a Davis. Gary Davis was a automotive marketing specialist who, after the war, decided he wanted to get into the car business and discovered a car that was built by Frank Curtis called the California Special, and decided to go in the car business, making these great three-wheel cars called the Davis safety car. Ended up being the Davis Divan. They made 17 before the government shut them down. But they're just cool cars, and love driving it, very well engineered. You might look at the design, it may ring some bells for you. Davis went to jail for a couple of years for fraud. Obviously he wasn't a threat to society, so they let him out on parole after probation after a couple of years, with the one stipulation that he could never be in the car business. But he found immediate success in another industry by kind of adapting that same design. And as you see, take a look at the nose and even the way the bumpers wrap around, you may see that his next commercial success, his big commercial success, was the design of the Dodgem rides and the bumper cars. This is our Matra Murena. There aren't many cars I don't like, but I kind of have pockets of cars I really obsess over, and Matras are one. We've had quite a few Matra de Jets. My first Matra was actually a Bagheera S, which I still have, and I had been looking for a Murena. Now, none of these cars were ever imported, but that kind of makes life more interesting, and it's never stopped me before. So I saw this one became available. I've been looking for a Murena, and I saw that this one became available, and when I saw the picture of the folk art on the hood, I knew I had to have it. It was down in Florida. It had just been imported, and we made it ours. So three across seating, which was kind of a trademark for the Bagheera and the Murena. A lot of people ask why, and the easy explanation is that it's a French car. You got to have room for both your mistress and your wife. So mid-engine design, using a Peugeot engine or Simca engine at the time that ended up being Talbot. So 2.2 liter, very well balanced, 50-50 weight dispersion, aluminum body, very lightweight with a space frame. So very successful race cars. Matra had very successful race cars. They never raced these models. These were strictly built for the street as kind of image cars.
Is that a French Panther?
No, it's German. It was done in Germany.
So yeah, what's the story?
I don't know.
Behind the,
I have no idea. I don't know. That's something you wouldn't expect a German to do to any car, especially a French car. But that kind of added to the appeal. And he even signed it. He has a very cool little logo down there. Kind of looks like a Hershey's Kiss. Clap? No clap.
No clap. We're still rolling.
All right. So this is. Most people look at this and say it's kind of a mainstream car for this garage, but my early years in the car hobby were Porsches. I had a lot of Porsche 356s, loved them, and then just came to appreciate the very early 911s, and had the opportunity to acquire this car sight unseen in Germany. Most people would say, oh, it's just a chopped up Targa, an early Targa. In reality, it is the car that the Targa concept was built on. There were two open pre-production prototypes done in 1964, and this is the first one. This is the car that was originally conceived as a 901 Cabriolet, because Porsche up to that point had to offer an open car because it made up 50% of their market share in the United States. this was done by Porsche, presented to the management board. They sent it back to Bootsy Porsche and said, we still need an open car, but they were worried about rollover protection laws in the United States. We need you to give us an open car that also has rollover protection. And then you could see here, they set the workmen loose and kind of turned it into the original Targa, which went back to the management board in February '65 and was approved on this car. And then the first Targas were released about 18 months later. So it's a great original car. There are only 2 pre-production prototypes known to exist. One is a coupe, which is fully restored and spectacular, and our car, which is obviously not restored, but it's an original car. About 80% of the paint is original, and just a fantastic car to drive, and just love driving it.
What's the story behind it? When it was sitting around the shop, they were using it to like deliver, to bring stuff around the shop, and it became a shop car. Is that?
Well, I think it became a test mule because there's some early 911S things. So it was a test mule for quite a while. You could see some prototype Fuchs wheels on it, some 911S gauges. But no, I don't know what else they used it for. It ended up going to a very large collector in Germany about 1966, and I acquired it from him in about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. The Powell brothers were very successful scooter manufacturers in Compton, California in the 40s. And after the war, in the early 50s, they felt America was getting ripped off by the big car companies, that every American should be able to buy a useful brand new car for under $1,000. So they designed a pickup truck basically with this body style. And as you can see, they built all the sheet metal in their shop. There's no compound curves in the body. It was all done in their shop to keep the cost down. And they made a lot of pickup trucks. Now, mechanically, they were buying 1941 Plymouths and stripping the bodies off and rebuilding engine, transmission, and brakes and selling them with a new car warranty for 3 months for $950. And they were very successful at that. And then later on, they wanted to expand their line to have a back seat, so they took basically their pickup and added this portion of the body, a back seat, a heavy tailgate, giant piece of plywood for the roof, and voila, they had one of the early SUVs. Now these were called sport wagons, and they were made for sportsmen, so they're big fishermen. They had these interesting channels here, which I think Dodge started putting them in their trucks recently. So you could put your fishing poles, or if you're a plumber, you could put your pipe and stuff in there.
Is that a stovepipe in there?
It's a stovepipe, absolutely. So, and if you're really a serious fisherman, you can keep your bait out here too. You wouldn't have to worry about the worms crawling up on your upholstery. So they made a few of these. The number varies as to what people speculate were made. The number 40 to maybe 200 max. They finally went out of business. They didn't go out of business. They stopped making the cars in 1957. And when they closed up shop, they had thousands of orders for them. But they had one major problem, is they ran out of 41 Plymouth donor cars. So back to scooters and radios. Actually the first of 52 that were made, and it was owned by Bert Sugarman originally, who actually had the cars commissioned just in the vein of the original dual gears and Chrysler concept cars, Chrysler concept cars from the 50s.